Marisha here, continuing my series on free things to see and do in London. And today I'm going to share with you just a handful of what I would call niche museums. That is, that they focus on one singular topic rather than being like the Victoria and Albert or the British Museum that covers a lot of ground and territory. The first I'm going to recommend is the Petrie Museum of Egyptology, which is centrally located in Bloomsbury on the UCL campus. And if you're into Egypt, this is the place you want to go. Of course, you're going to want to go to the British Museum, which is not very far from this one, because they have the Rosetta Stone and they have a lot of really large sculptures of like Ramses II and things like that. But the Petrie Museum, while it is much smaller and therefore cannot house like huge statues, is focused only on Egyptology. And because it's much smaller, it also means that it's quieter and it's free from crowds. So it's a really nice place to go when you want to escape the crowds of London. And like British Museum is great, but it can get really busy and really kind of overwhelming sometimes. So the Petrie Museum, even though it doesn't have like huge artifacts, it has a large number of artifacts. They just tend to be smaller. They have lots of Shabtis, for example. I do believe they have a mummy, if I remember correctly. And one of the things that I really liked about the Petrie Museum is they had on display a beaded dress. And it's just the beads. So it kind of looks almost like a fishnet. It's something that you would have worn over like a sheath dress probably, and it's gorgeous, and it's in a glass case, and you can kind of, depending on the lighting, catch your reflection in the glass and take a selfie so it looks like you're wearing the dress. But anyway, this is a museum if you are interested enough in Egyptology that you want to delve beyond just like the big flashy pharaoh stuff and get a better idea of kind of like everyday life as well. The next one I want to recommend is actually a funeral museum. This is in the basement of a funeral home in Clerkenwell. It's the Thomas Treacy Funeral Home. And so you go down into the basement, and as you could probably guess from the fact that it's in the basement of a funeral home, it's not a huge museum. It's just one room with several display cases, and it is not super professionally done. A lot of the information that is posted is like computer printouts. Um, but as long as like that doesn't bother you, it is a very informative museum because it talks about kind of the history of funerals and funerary rites across time and across places. So you'll learn about Zoroastrian funeral rites and ancient Roman funeral rites, and from different eras, different places. And I don't think that you have to be a particularly like morbid or goth person to enjoy this place. Now, I understand, obviously, it is kind of a niche thing, and there's some people watching this who are like, no, thank you. But I mean, death is a universal thing, and all cultures have some way of addressing that and sort of honoring the people, the loved ones that they've had who have passed on. And so I think it's a very fascinating look into kind of like the human condition to go to this museum. The third one that I recommend is the London Mithraeum. Now, this is part of like the Roman ruins that can still be found in London. If you're not aware, right, that London was a Roman settlement at one point, and there's actually part of a Roman wall that you can see just wandering around London. But the Mithraeum, you go into the building and there's some information about the Mithraeum and some artifacts and information about life in Roman Britain. And then you go down several floors into their basement to where the actual ruins of the Mithraeum, basically the Temple of Mithras, was located. And you go in and you see the ruins of this temple, and there will be kind of a show that they put on with some lights to kind of fill in the gaps of what the ruins would have looked like when they were fully like built, and then also kind of an audio of what it might have been like to take part in a ritual as part of the cult of Mithras, and hear some of the chants and oaths that would have been done there. So that is a really cool thing if you're into ancient history, particularly the Roman era of London. And then my final recommendation is the Royal Academy of Music. Now, this is close to Madame Tussauds, so it's also sort of centrally located. Um, and obviously, it's the school, but within it, they have a small museum of musical instruments, and it's mostly stringed instruments and like pianos, harpsichords, organs, that kind of thing. And you can go in and get some information about these historical instruments. The stringed instruments, they do have a Stradivarius and a few other really kind of well known, priceless stringed instruments made by famous, like, instrument makers like Stradivarius. There are some others. Their names are escaping me, but if you're really into music, you probably would recognize them. And if you're not, then you can learn something and hopefully retain that information better than I have. And then when you go to the place that has the like the old pianos and harpsichords, there's, at least when I was there, a member of staff on hand who will play them for you. Like, you're not allowed to touch them, obviously, because these are like priceless historical instruments, but there's someone on staff who will play you a little bit on them so you can hear what they would sound like. Now, this list is not even close to exhaustive. There are tons of like niche museums and things to visit and do in London. Maybe I'll make a part two, but this just gives you a little taste of a few of the things that are available. Like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.